Cairns Show. My name is Nick Cairns, and we are live from Wittenberg, Germany. Tonight we have a very special guest, all the way from 1520, with the help of Mr. Bond's time machine. Please welcome Katerina Von Bora.
Oh,
hello, Katerina.
Oh,
you look so nice. I
thank
love
you
the
very
scarf.
much. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I know you're a very busy man.
I know we get a lot of historic figures, but I was very excited to interview you. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and kind of give us a background in case no one knows who you are?
Well, as many of you may know, I was the wife of Martin Luther. Luther was my husband, and he.
Wait, was it a she?
No, what he did was very as outstanding at my time. He basically had brand new ideas of the Catholic Church. He basically gave 95 complaints and theses on the endowments that the Pope would give out to people in Germany, and he was very unhappy with that. And many people are, to this day, well, back in my time, going to study from Luther, and it's spreading like wildfire all over Germany.
That's great. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Because I heard you accomplished many things, some before and a lot after your marriage to Luther.
Well, nothing that God Himself wouldn't give me, but what my childhood was when I was 5 years old, I was part of a very poor family, yet it was a noble family. And my father, after my mother died at 5, sent me to a convent where I was raised and educated from when I was 5 till I was 16.
Wow. So when you woke up one day, did you just decide, I want to be a nun? Because I can't imagine very many little girls saying that and wanting that.
Well, no. As many people may know, a convent is basically a boarding school taught by nuns. So I was taught reading. I read all the scripts. I learned how to read the Bible, and of course, I got closer to my Lord. And as I grew older, at the age of 16, I agreed with my aunt, who was already a nun there, that I would forever be within the walls of this convent, reading about my Lord. Yes.
So this obviously didn't happen because you married Luther and you kind of changed what the view of family life was like. Can you go into a little bit about that?
Well, I was honestly set on forever giving myself to the Lord and His Savior, but that all changed after me and 11 other nuns actually read His scriptures and His writings. These ideas were so new to us. It opened my eyes to a whole different world, and perhaps a different way of seeing my Lord. A way that, when I was taught by the Catholic Church that I needed to follow their rules, when in truth all I needed to do was read the Bible, because the Bible is the literal words of God. And that is the very basic what Luther was giving his idea is. Yes.
Let's go into Luther. I want to remind everyone, Luther was a monk before he wrote his theses. So how did a nun and a monk decide to break away?
Well, this goes quite back till when I was still a nun in the convent. Me and 11 other nuns had access to secret pamphlets of his writings, and we were all studying it in secret because, as you know, the nuns didn't want us to read stuff about Luther. The Pope was very upset with him. So, when me and 11 other nuns, we decided to actually correspond with Luther. So we sent him letters.
Wow.
And he responded very graciously, saying that if we shared the same views as him, he would help us escape, which is what we wanted to do because we wanted to live our lives differently. And so we corresponded through letters, and eventually he came up with the idea of escaping at night on Easter in fish barrels, all the way to Wittenberg, Germany, here.
Fish barrels? To here to Wittenberg? Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't very pleasant, but it was done. And I couldn't be more grateful, because that brought on many important events in my life. Yes.
So he kind of changed your life. I mean, you went from being a poor girl living in a convent to running away with this man. Was this easy for Luther?
Well,
easy for you. Excuse me. Was it
for
easy
me,
for you?
For me, when I read Luther's teachings, it completely changed how I I saw God, and I wanted to meet the man who wrote it. So obviously, when I went to meet Luther, my first thought was to marry him. He was the only man that I thought worthy of my marriage, except for another man, which was his friend, who at the time I didn't have that much interest in. So, for Luther, I think it was rather difficult, because as many of you know, he was a monk, well, an ex-monk at that, and I was a nun, both completely unable to marry according to Catholicism, and so,
Oh, excuse me. I think we're getting a call. Oh, hello, Luther. No, she's here. Okay, all right, we're good. That was just Luther. He wanted to know where you were. You're good.
Okay.
So anyway, it was hard for Luther and you?
Yeah, it was hard for both of us. Actually, there's a very interesting quote he said. I think, let me see if I remember. He said that it would riddle the Pope.
Riddle?
It would riddle, if he were to marry, it would riddle the Pope. It would make his father happy, and would cause a change of events that would have been unspeakable. So without much thought, and without telling many people, me and him secretly married. And thus began perhaps something very eye-opening for many people, because people who correspond with Catholicism and marriage, the clergy could never do that. No.
So, being here now, do you see your marriage change the way clergy may act? Because I've heard that after you did what you did, clergy and marriage it kind of was shaken up. Because before it was clergy had nothing to do with getting married.
Well, yes, it was very much out of the norm, and it is seen that after that, many priests began to marry with the same ideas as Luther. Yeah. I don't know if there's a religion today that perhaps has that, but yes, it was very much different. It completely changed the views of how clergy life should have been dealt with, you know? It was always very much abstinence for the clergy, a way to be closer to God, but in reality it never said anything of that in the Bible. Why? The Bible is the Word of God. The Bible isn't meant to be interpreted in different ways by the Pope or by Catholics. No, those are just ideas. Those are just thoughts of other people. No. What we need to study in order to be closer to his Lord is the Bible, because that is his words. The Testament, the Old Testament, that's what we must study. And the only way to get closer to God is through faith.
Okay, all right. Moving on, when you married Luther and you did all this, it's obviously looked at as negative. Was there any privileges, any upsides to being one of the first nuns to marry a monk?
Well, of course not. I did my duty as a wife, as any wife should have. I did my best to make my husband's life easier, as he was a very important man. And all I did was for him, because I love him. And my own personal view is I wanted to serve his Lord, and if his Lord wanted to speak his words through Luther, I will aid him in any way possible.
Wow.
So I don't think I did very much at all. I think I did everything I had to.
That's very noble of you. Very noble of you.
Okay.
So, Katerina, everyone in the audience wants to know more about you. Can you tell us more about your daily life?
Well, my daily life, I don't think, was perhaps a bit different than everyone else's, but nothing too much to handle. I would wake up at 4 in the morning. I would grow the vegetables and, of course, cook and feed all 6 of our children. I would take care of our livestock. That includes our pigs or chickens, and I would, of course, kill them and cook them too. And we lived at a monastery, the monastery that Luther used to live at, and it was actually quite big. And, of course, because my husband was so generous, giving away money to the poor, we were a bit tight on finances most of our life. So I turned it into an inn with 30 rooms. Up to 30 students would come in, and I would, of course, take care of them, their food, cleaning, personally, of course, while Luther would teach and would spread his works. What else would I do? I of course also took care of my children. I personally educated them. and I was sort of manager of our household. I was the one responsible of our money and our finances, and when it came down to it, I would oftentimes tell Luther himself that we needed to cut back on certain things.
Wow, that seems to be a lot. We also got letters from back when Luther sent them to you, kind of displeased. He almost seemed like, I don't want to say the marriage wasn't working out, but that there was a lot of difficulties, because marriage is more than putting a ring on it, they say.
Oh, no, it was more like bickering. He would oftentimes get upset when I would be very upfront with him, but of course, one of the many things he loved about me was that I was the type of woman that would tell him his faults. So many times I would tell him off for spending our money wrongfully.
As a wife should, right?
And also, well, yeah.
So, I also heard a rumor that you brewed beer?
Why, yes, I did many things in the house. I forgot to say it earlier, but yes, I would in fact brew the beer for our husband and the many guests we used to have at our household.
That seems like a fun job.
Well, it was hard work, but nothing I couldn't handle.
Nothing the beer couldn't cure, right? So, after all this, kind of wrapping it up, you've done a lot in your life. Is there anything that you want to say to maybe people in the present right now that have faced oppression like you have and want to make a big change? What would you say to them?
Faith is the number one thing everyone must have. One must be close to God, and this is something that me and Luther both very much believed, even after my beloved died. Times were very tough for me because right after he died, the Black Death swept through Germany. So I turned our humble home into a hospital for such people too. So I of course would take care of the sick, and myself I contracted Black Death myself quite mildly, but of course it was tough because I had to take care of all 6 of my children. And despite Luther actually giving me everything in his will, people didn't respect a woman in our household. So many times looters would come and rob from us. But I think I would tell women, anyone during this time, that faith will always push you forward. Because despite all those things, despite all the toughness I've been through, God has always been by my side, and He always will be, and will always be watching over us. Yes.
Thank you. You heard it right here from the woman herself. Faith. That's all the time we have tonight. Thank you, Katerina. When she comes back, we're going to play giant beer pong.